Good day, Ma'am Felicidad, Perena, and 2CW. I'm Marie Claire Blanche Agusola, and I was assigned to report about Nick Joaquin's jaw-dropping short fiction, Summer Solstice. I'm very much excited and honored to report this piece to you guys, mas lalo na International Women's Month ngayon, March. Happy Women's Month to you guys, and I hope you will enjoy my report. So first, let us talk about Nick Joaquin, our shining author for today. Known for his literary work, The Woman with Two Navels, among many other award-winning pieces, Nicomedes Nick Marquez Joaquin, born on May 4, 1917 in Paco, Manila, is arguably the greatest writer of Philippine literature. However, if you were to compliment him on this, he would most likely go red to boot, laugh nervously, then run to the hills. That is how timid our fellow Tomasian was, to the point he almost did not accept his award when he won National Artist for Literature in 1976. He also was known as Quijano de Manila when he was a journalist for the Philippine Free Press, which is a weekly English language news magazine which was founded in 1908. Although he was known to be shy and elusive, his works reflected no such thing, for they were always thunderous as they were daring. You would see why later. It is also important to take note, fellow creative writers, that his writing style is very, very realistic, coupled with stream of consciousness techniques, which is a technique of writing that tries to capture the natural flow of a character's extended thought process, often by incorporating sensory impressions, incomplete ideas, unusual syntax, and rough grammar. And although he almost always had used the English language in his works, he was nevertheless a proud Filipino, as his works, such as this one, always had reflected the diverse culture of Filipinos. As of the background of the story, originally published in 1972, Summer Solstice gives light to women oppression in Philippine society during the Spanish occupation, specifically during the 1850s. Joaquin later turned this story into a play entitled Tadtarin, A Witch's Sabbath in 3 acts, on which a film adaptation has been based. The items in conflict were paganism against Christianity, the primitive against the civilized, and the status of men against the status of women. Although it is unknown that there is a specific situation that played as the inspiration of the story, I'm sure that we can all agree that women oppression is anything but situational and specific. Although it has been said that this story brilliantly depicted the status of women had in the past, there are many critics that had pointed out that this literary piece actually does not speak of women empowerment. In fact, it may have made fun of it. Let's judge it ourselves later. But before we go to the synopsis, it is important to take note that this story is tells about a ritual performed by women to call upon the gods to grant fertility. The ritual they perform is to dance around a century-old baleta tree, and the ritual was known as a Tadtarin or Tadtarin, and it lasted for 3 days during the summer months, during the summer solstice. And it's also important to take note that the last day of the Tadtarin is the same day as St. John's Day. The story is again set on St. John's Day in the 1850s in the Philippines. We are immediately introduced to the Mareta family. It is comprised with Don Paeng, the father, Doña Lumpeng, the mother, and their 3 sons. We know that they are rich because they own horses, have a yaya for the kids, a driver named Entoy, and a house cook named Amanda. Amanda and Entoy are married to one another. Our main character is Doña Lumpeng, who had awoken to a sound of screaming, which we later find out was from Amanda. Entoy tells Doña Lumpeng that Amanda has participated in the Tadtarin ritual. Doña Lumpeng gets mad mad at Entoy for allowing his wife to join the ritual, and Doña Lumpeng tells Entoy to beat his wife. But Entoy, who usually beats up his wife on a regular basis without hesitation, suddenly declined. He even seemed to be afraid of her. While the Moretta family was on the carriage on their way to see the procession of St. John, Dona Lumpeng talks to her husband, Don Paeng, and marveled on how Entoy, for the first time in his life, seemed to be afraid of his wife. Entoy even said something as deep as this: "She must do as she pleases, otherwise the grain would not grow, the trees would bear no fruit, the rivers would give no fish, and the animals would die." So why was Entoy saying this? What was he saying? Why was he suddenly afraid? We would find out later. Soon the carriage comes to a halt and everyone watches the St. John procession taking place. At first, Doña Lumpeng was excited to see the man, but then she found herself annoyed and disgusted at the arrogance of the men taking part in the procession. She then came into a conclusion that the reason why the men uh, looked so sure of themselves, it is because they had such good wives. They were so sure of their wives. But then she also realized that even the women were the reason of this man, the man's poise, these men, their confidence. Women also have the power to destroy that confidence of men as well. Basically, a woman can both make and break a man. As what we see here, um, as we see here, so thoughts, yeah. She said, women may have built this up, this poise of the male, but women could destroy it too. So yeah, basically she's saying that women can make and break men. So after watching the procession, the Moreta family went to a family gathering. Uh, so Doña Lupeng discovers that Guido, Don Paeng's cousin, who also just came home to the Philippines from studying in Europe, had witnessed the Tadtarin the previous night. And to Doña Lupeng's surprise, Guido, the handsome, respectable young lad, had found their old and ugly house cook Amanda beautiful, as he said, beautiful as the old tree you are leaning on. He then proceeded to marvel about women, which shocked Doña Lumpeng. When she asked if it is normal to talk highly of women in Europe, Guido then replied that not only did they talk highly about women, they in fact worshipped them. And he also pointed out about the Tadtarin, that rituals such as the Tadtarin, those rituals come to us from the earliest dawn of the world. And the dominant figure is not the male, but the female. I think it is to remind us men that once upon a time, you women were supreme and we men were the slaves. Then, as if to prove a point, Guido then kissed Lupeng's toes. Don Paeng is disgusted not because his cousin Guido made an intimate move to his wife, but because Guido, a man, showed adoration to a woman. Doña Lumpeng then insisted that she wanted to witness Tadtarin. Don Paeng joins her, but eventually gets himself beaten up by women when he tried to go after his wife when she joined the ritual. Once they get home, Don Paeng wanted to beat his wife as a form of avenging himself from getting beaten up by women earlier. But he eventually found out that he could not bring himself to whip his wife. Doña Lumpeng makes Don Paeng, eventually Doña Lumpeng makes her husband Don Paeng tell her that he adores her. After some insisting, he finally cried out that he adores her, that he indeed worships her, that he is her dog, her slave. And at the end of the story, Don Paeng finally fully submits to his wife Doña Lumpeng by kissing her feet. So here are some my thoughts and important notes that we could talk about. So first, let us talk about the character development of Donna Lumpeng. Uh, at the start, I did not like Doña Lumpeng. I was very annoyed at her because she gave off that snobby, rich aura, um, to the point na she look at everyone down, including her fellow women. But when it comes to men, she's very excited. Like this is because she felt very close to her womanhood. This could be seen when not only she never stops her driver and toy from constantly beating up his wife, but she also ordered him to give her a hitting when Amanda went to the Tadtarin. Secondly, she also immediately felt very embarrassed when she saw Amanda naked and in that state earlier. Meanwhile, on the other hand, she was very excited to see the man of St. John. As could be seen in this narration, "Oh, look, boys, here comes the St. John," cried Doña Lumpeng, and she sprang up in the swaying carriage. Like she was so excited, the carriage has not stopped. She was already standing up to see the man. But this is when she started to change point of views. When she, I quote, smelled the man horde, she felt disgusted and asked silently, why do they look so confident? As what I mentioned earlier, this is when she realized the power women had in their hands, that they could make and break a man indeed. And even her herself was surprised at her own thoughts and bitterness. When she felt what was it like to be adored through the actions of Guido, that is when she started to yearn for more affection, or should I say, more adoration towards her husband, or perhaps from men in general, or perhaps in retrospect, she wanted to be herself. She wanted to be in control this time. This is why she was able to stand her ground and insisted with her husband to let her go to the Tatarin. Even though earlier she was so mad at Amanda for going to that ritual, but now this time, now that she uh, got a glimpse of what it was like to be adored through the actions of Guido, Doña Lumping herself now wanted to witness Tatarin. So when she attended the Tatarin, this is when her suppression truly went satisfied. This is when her eyes were opened. Uh, we know that uh, we know that she has always been suppressed of her feelings of wanting to be adored through her conversation with Dom Paeng during the last scene. This is what she said. "How I behave tonight is what I am. If you call that lewd, then I was always a lewd woman, and a whipping will not change me, though you whipped me till I died." So basically, she had always been mad. She has always been secretly yearning for adoration. Basically, the Tadtarin never like gave her a new personality, or it never changed her, but it merely woke her up. Although we do not know for sure if a real mystical spell from this pagan ritual fell upon her, but I would like to think that she felt so touched and inspired by the passionate dancing of the woman horde. That kind of dancing and celebrating had no chains of men. It held nothing back. It was like only women celebrating women, and that passion of those women dancing paved the way for Donna Lumpeng to think for herself, to finally do things for herself. Next, let's talk about Tatarin, the winning festival present in the story. Let me narrate the description the story gave us. The cult of the Tadtarin is celebrated on 3 days: the feast of Saint John and the 2 preceding days. On the first night, a young girl heads the procession. On the second, a mature woman, and on the third, a very old woman who dies and comes to life again. In these processions, as in those of Pakil and Obando, everyone dances. The 3 girls who serves as a Tadtadrin, the young, mature, and the old woman, symbolize how from from at the young age till the old age, women shall always be superior than men. Let's talk about the symbolism of Saint John. Ethnic quote from the narration: a fine, blonde, heroic Saint John, very male, very arrogant. Indeed, the story had narrated the saint symbolizes basically the domination and superiority of men, which was eventually cut off by Herodias, the princess who ordered her father, the king, to cut off Saint John's head as a gift to her. I'm sure that we are aware of that story, how Saint John the Baptist died. So yes, let me narrate a little bit from the story. Saint John, basically, while Don Paeng and Don Lupeng was witnessing the Tadtarin, it was a heroic scene in the eyes of Don Paeng, since he was a man. So again, let me narrate. It was a Saint John, indeed, in the hands of Herodias. The scene was like a doomed captive these witches were subjugating first to their derision, a gross and brutal caricature of his sex. The story said when Don Paeng was witnessing the Tadtarin with his wife, the scene was indeed a picture of Saint John's decapitated head in the hands of Herodias. It was a mockery and an insult to Don Paeng, being a man. So it is very interesting how Tadtarin, the pagan celebration, and how it was pro-women, parallels to the celebration of St. John, which was depicted of men. And the way Nick Joaquin portrayed the two in the story, it is as if he is showing how the Philippines started to have gender inequality when the Spaniards, the ones who introduced Roman Catholicism to us, came to our country. St. John symbolizes superiority of men, while Tadtarin symbolizes superiority of women. The two events show opposition between who is more powerful, who is higher, who is more powerful, who should be the leader. And as we witnessed during the last scene and during the actions of Guido, basically the winner is, the dominant figure is not the male but the female. Women were supreme and men were the slaves. So hyperbole, the use of exaggeration, was intensely used in this narrative. It was so exaggerated to the point that there were a lot of suggestive tones in the story. Like during the scene of Amanda, as can be described here, it was described in such a sexual manner. But if we were to retrospect, it was most likely the scene was pointing towards childbirth or labor, which would make a whole lot sense since the Tadtarin is about fertility. Although in the other side, this is Nick Joaquin we're talking about, the sexual innuendos, if I pronounce that correctly, may be intentional. Like if we, for example, if we typed sex in Philippine literature in Google, his name and some of his works, such as The Woman with Two Navels, will pop up. So critics considered the summer solstice as pro-woman, or a tale of triumphant women because of Don Paeng's eventual submission to Dona Lumping, and the portrayal of women's reproductive role that made them rulers of men. However, there were also critics who called the summer solstice as pseudo-feminist, or a work that was not truly feminist, because to them the authority and power given to women in the story was unreal, short-lived, of no social value. Based on the story, the empowerment of women emerged only once a year during summer solstice. On a more personal note, although that would make sense, I deny that this story made fun of women. I felt empowered actually and in awe of the power women had in the story, no matter how brief it was. For me, it showed that indeed, if women saw the truth of the power they had in their hands, and if ever women ever wanted to, they can indeed shake the world. And it's only a matter of wanting and believing. As the feasts events and happenings shows the differences of men. I mean, the feast events and happenings that we saw in the story shows the differences of men and women in terms of which is dominant, which is higher, which is the one who should lead, who is the master. And the story was about superiority and the conflicts between who ought to be more powerful. And through the ending, we know that women prevails. So these are my references of my report, and I hope you enjoyed my report, guys. So thank you, Mom, and to CW.